I told you earlier, the 6 is by far the biggest type. Many would say it's actually 50% of the human race. Now, what creates that? Is it the insecure childhood? Is it the insecure world that makes people so fear-based? That so many people are so filled with fear? That's probably a piece. It's also the type that we divide into 2 major types. And I want to give you that right at the beginning, because they will feel very different. There is the phobic 6. Now that animal is the mouse or the deer. It runs as soon as there's danger. And then there's the counter-phobic 6, which would be Adolf Hitler, who pretend they're not afraid. You can normally see it in their eyes. You can see it in Hitler's eyes. They're scared to death of reality. And so what they decide to do is move totally into it and take absolute control of it. But it's all out of fear. The counterphobic 6 is often mistaken for an 8. But they're in fact very dangerous people, because they try to disguise their fear with bravado and false self-assurance. And I know, I can do, I'm not going to let anybody hurt me, right? I'm not going to let anybody get at me. Without healing, all of us are dangerous people, but that's very true of the counterphobic 6. I would say it's a smaller portion of the 6s, but they're the psychopathic, sociopathic personality in their worst form. That, these are the people who go in post offices and shoot everybody in sight. Very fear-based people who don't for a minute admit that they're afraid and deny their fear to themselves. Agere contra, we said in Latin, act against their fear, to disguise their fear from themselves, and do very, very destructive things. They're very attracted to the military, to guns, to militarism. These 2 boys at Columbine, I bet you anything they were 6s, counterphobic 6s. They're just fascinated by any talk of, Nazism or skinhead worldviews, where they focus the danger in one particular race, in one particular gender. I mean, a lot of these men who kill women. Women are the source of all evil. I've just got to rape and kill as many women as I can, and this will get rid of the evil in the world. That's what the counterphobic 6 does. He or she is a classic scapegoater to control their constant anxiety, and know that the 6 does have constant anxiety. They will find something to hold that anxiety. They are the bad people. That race, that religion, they are evil. I am good. And now I am doing a good thing for the world by eliminating them or killing them. And inside of their mind, remember, they're all in their heads, the heart of the head space, there's no corrective possible, no way you can get in. It's all a self-validating system inside of their own brain. Notice how many of these mass killers or loners who live in little cabins somewhere and just justify their entire worldview. So it's the 5 come to a very sick, paranoid level. If you want the description of the 6 psychologically, it is the paranoid type, who sees danger everywhere. Now, the much more common form, thank God, is simply the phobic 6. And I'm sure there's a lot of you in this room. They're everywhere. They're lovely people, all right? They're naturally humble. They're naturally teachable. They're naturally loyal. God, if you're married to a 6, my sister is, she always says, oh, I'm so glad I'm married to a 6. And he says, you should be. I'll be faithful forever. I mean, 6s are faithful, loyal friends and partners. Once they decide to trust you, you got a friend for life. And that's what's so beautiful about them. I mean, everybody else can turn against you. If they've decided you're their friend, you'll be their friend. And they will stick with you, and even when other people might say bad things about you. Because that loyalty comes from a deep, deep place. But to be honest, it also comes from a place of fear. And this is what's so hard for them to recognize. That the world is a scary place. And the only way I can overcome that fear is by aligning myself with another person, or a strong person, or a strong institution, or a strong country, or a strong military, especially religion and military, they are attracted to. It's no surprise that we had all these churches written on the front of the church, Pro Deo et Patria, for God and the fatherland. Because the two go together in the six's mind. That those are the ultimate security systems. My country will always protect me, and my God will always protect me, not the other people, just my religion, you know. And that's the delusion that his fears or her fears lead her to. They often can avoid their own delinquency, their own darkness, by seeing it over there and attacking it over there and killing it over there. They love to think of themselves as orthodox and true and conservative in the best sense of the term. And it can be the best sense of the term, but it can also be the worst sense of the term, where my conservatism is nothing except self-security, protecting myself. The country is Germany, and when my book first came out in German, before it came out in English, not that I wrote it, Andreas did in its final form, but I remember the first trip I went over there after the book had come out. I said, oh my God, I don't think these Germans are going to like being called sixes. In all my subsequent trips, I've never had a single German disagree with me. They said, that is our country. And you do not understand the German type unless you understand the predominant, all-pervasive nature of fear. And aligning yourself with absolute systems. That's why you create the German philosophers with final explanations for everything. The final explanation, the very phrase that Hitler used, is the search in the security-seeking mind. It can't deal with ambiguity. Isn't it interesting that we even use the word Angst, the German word for fear, to describe this inner, all-pervasive insecurity? And I must say, in the German, it has taken on the probably stereotype that many of us have had of the German people. I'm German by background, so I guess I'm free to say this. The Achtung, this is the way it is, no more discussion, right? You've got to know that's a front. That's a cover. Don't believe it. Don't believe it at all. And I think that's why this book, my first one, ended up, it's now in every fourth house in all of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And they just couldn't understand why it sold so big. Well, I think that's the reason. The German people have been trying to find a way out of why did they keep doing this? Why the First World War? Why the Second World War? Why the skinheads? Why this always dividing the world up into the good guys and the bad guys? Well, the six gave them a way to understand that. And I would like to believe gave them a way out of it. That we are fear-based people. And that fear leads us to this idolization of militarism and, until very recently, the idolization of religion. But always looking for absolute religion. It's no surprise the Reformation began in Germany, too. We've got the answer. And Luther did, in part. But then it becomes another absolutism, and pretty soon we've got the same problem all over again. That's simply the nature of religious reform. So it creates dictators. It creates tyrants who expect absolute loyalty, who will demand absolute loyalty. Sixes don't like, in their unhealthy state, to look at you eyeball to eyeball, because they know you'll see their fear. And you will. I can see it in George Bush's eyes very easily. I'm sure he's a six, as his father was. It's very interesting. Both of them are sixes. But if you look at George, he's trying so hard. He wants to speak with authority, but the natural authority is not there. And I'm not trying to be political. I'm trying to be enneagrammatic. The natural authority is not there. You can hardly believe it, that he really believes it. What you're picking up is the six energy. the tremendous self-doubt inside of him, and the overcoming of it by bravado. Although I basically think he's a phobic 6. I don't think he's really counterphobic, although he shows some of that in his readiness to kill and the capital punishment in Texas and the wars. That gives him the sense of being in control and being absolute. They say, maybe somewhat unkindly, 6s are either at your feet or they're at your throat. And I know over the years, because the Catholic Church tends to gather an awful lot of 6s. Whenever you have a big security system, you will gather a high degree of 6s. So because I don't always say things in the way that Catholics are used to, over the years, I've had a lot of 6s attack me in the vestibule after Mass or after a conference or the hate letters. And you can feel that they're at my throat. I mean, they just want to kill me. Because talking this way utterly undercuts their security system. And I don't mean to be attacking 6s especially, although my spiritual director who taught me the Enneagram way back in the 70s, he said, Richard, you wanted me to tell you why you became a priest? And I said, why? And he says, one's become priests to change the 6s who've controlled the priesthood for too long. Because the 6 is all into conformity, the laws, legalism, ritualism. You don't break the laws. We ones, we only believe the law insofar as it works. You know, when it doesn't work, we're sort of like 3s in that regard too. Then we don't have much use for it, which can make us rather righteous. What else can I say about the 6? Some people say, to give a childhood explanation, that they didn't have reliable authority as a child. Don't make too much of that. But I think we're probably producing more 6s than ever when I see the rise in fundamentalism. When you grow up in an insecure world where everything is in flux and everything is changing, there is the psychic need for something solid, something authoritative, something certain, something clear. So is it any surprise that the religions that are growing are the religions with absolutes? The only religious communities growing are not the Dominicans and the Franciscans. The orders that are growing are these very conservative groups that have an absolute, immediate answer for everything. And that appeals to the young man under 25. It also appeals to the 6. They said to me in Germany last time, they said, if the Catholic Church keeps going the way it's going, the only people left in it 50 years from now will be 6s, right? And there's people with a high need for authority, certitude, structure, and answers for everything. Not people for a journey, especially a journey of faith, which demands not knowing, not being certain. You have to be able to maintain and hold a certain degree of anxiety and ambiguity to be a person of faith, as far as I'm concerned. And we're not teaching that anymore, at all. And the young men coming to be priests are all boys. I understand when they grow up, and they need it. I had it in 1940 and 1950, Kansas. They didn't have it in the 1970s and 1980s. So I can't hate them for it, but they have this tremendous need for absolutes. And there's an extraordinary amount of young 6s who are becoming priests. What that means for the church and the rest of our lifetime, I don't know, but I don't think I'm going to fit in, because I just don't have the need for all that. And I don't mean to be arrogant. The only reason I don't have the need for all of it is because I had it once. Do you follow me? I had certitude, authority, a very reliable authority structure from my mom and my dad. It gave me psychic groundedness. So when the 60s came, fine, no problem. I know who I am. Most people, when they don't know who they are attracted to the 6 kind of stuff, and I want to say it this way, even when they're not 6s. Okay? And maybe that's why people are saying that it appears half the world is 6s. Because we just have an enormous portion of the human race today in the Muslim world, in the Jewish world, and in the Christian world who are demanding absolute clarity, absolute black and whites. And this does not bode well for our future politics or our worldview. But I say it in this context because this is, for me, maybe one of the strongest examples of the political implications of this teaching. That if we can expose some of these demons, if we can expose some of these lies, maybe we're actually going to, unfreeze a lot of frozen people. So, any questions on the 5 or 6? Yes. Animal. The rabbit, remember, or the deer, or the mouse. And the counterphobic animal is the rhinoceros. I don't know rhinoceroses, is that a word? Well, but apparently when they're afraid, they charge into you, right? So the rhinoceros for the counterphobic, the deer, and the mouse.
And the conversion experience for the 6?
The conversion experience for the 6, well, actually there's a number of them. That's probably why I didn't get into it. First of all, that they have to find an authority they can trust. I would still say that for all 9 types, the only way out is an authentic God experience. For all 9 types. But I'm going to say that very strongly for the 6. If the 6 meets the God who is their rock, their fortress, their deliverer, and I mean that on the experiential level, not just a verse in the Psalms, but I know there's someone holding me. There's someone believing in me. There's someone who's created me and who loves me and who is more me than I am myself. That's the way out of all 9 types. But it's the quickest way out for the 6. And these become the Oscar Romeros, who we present as the patron saint of the 6s. Those of you who know the life of the Bishop of El Salvador, you read his early letters and writings. He was a fragile, insecure, scared little priest who wanted to follow all the rules, and he did, and that got him promoted as the primary bishop in El Salvador. He wasn't bishop, was it a couple weeks, One of his major priests was shot, and that was a conversion experience for him that made him fall into the hands of the living God. He found his center in the last 3 years of his life. His sermons are some of the most courageous you could possibly imagine. It's almost like a man without any fear whatsoever. So a tragedy like that can do it too. That it makes you find your one absolute that you can rely upon. So you will stop relying upon outer authorities and begin to trust inner authority. Now that's the big movement. It has to move from outer authority to inner authority. And I know we Catholics especially have been warned against that. That's dangerous. Don't you trust yourselves. You just trust the priest and the Pope, That does not help anything. Does not help the coming of the gospel to tell you not to trust yourself. At a certain level in your life, brothers and sisters, that's all you're going to have. And if you haven't learned how to go to a solid place where you know it's not just you, but it's God in you and you in God, and I've got to do it now and pay the price for it, that'll be when you finally discover the meaning of faith. And I don't think we've taught our people in that kind of faith, that it will feel like I'm breaking the rules at that point. You understand? Like, oh my God, this is dangerous. Last week I used the example of the Austrian Franz Jägerstätter, who no bishop supported him in all of Austria in his opposition to Hitler. Not a single bishop. Not his parish priest. Not his wife. Not his children. Not his neighborhood. Not his town. We got one of our rooms at Tepeyac, our guest house, named after him. This little Austrian layman said, I cannot do it. It is wrong. Can you imagine the fear? And I was able to meet his wife there years ago, and she knows the Enneagram. She says, he's a 6. He was a 6, Yeah, he's a 6. Franz Jägerstätter found his place of truth in God, and even the bishops couldn't convince him he was wrong. Marvelous stuff. And Romero would be the other example. Yes?
Well, I'm 6, and I heard you use clarity as synonymous with certitude. And to me, there's a difference in a need for clarity versus a need for certitude.
There is. You're right on that.
How I'm seeing it also is that I see many of the types, such as the 8 and the 1, as black and white. And I know my dad doing it. It's black and white. as a 6, it's very much the nuances. It's very much the grays. And it may be some of the insecurity that drives that down, looking at the choices. But to me, I'm not black and white as a 6. I'm not looking for certitude, but I am looking
For clarity. I think you're just, thank you for saying it, you're coming across as a very healthy 6. Yeah, that is a healthy 6. And I think that's an excellent distinction. And I also agree with you, the 1 and the 8 are much more inclined to black and white thinking. It's just when the 6 aligns himself or herself with an authority, then he or she can get into black and white thinking, because they will not allow any self-doubt to enter the picture. But the search for clarity, I would say also, is one of the greatest gifts of the 6 and the 5, both of them. Thank you. Thank you. Yes?
Do 6s choose phobic 6s as their leaders? Or somebody like Rush Limbaugh, is he a phobic 6 or a clever guy who's manipulating 6s?
Now, my guess would be, remember, these are all guesses. I think Rush Limbaugh is an 8. I would assume. Yeah. Yeah, I would. No, I don't. Remember, you see your own fault in other people. 6s are not that trusting of other 6s. They see through it. They know that that person is basically afraid.
So why did Hitler rise then in Germany? It sounds a bit like the scared German people took a phobic.
Counterphobic 6, yeah. The answer for that, I don't know. All the social reasons why he was able to hold the persona together, but somehow he did. Yeah. Yes?
What would be more of the positive characteristics?
Loyalty and courage. Loyalty and courage. In other words, they are very loyal to what they believe in, to their friends, to the groups that they're a part of. I would also say 6s and 9s are the most humble. There's a natural, the rest of us are so damn sure of ourselves. And thank God the 6s have this healthy self-doubt. Well, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe you're not seeing the whole picture. You wish other people were that way. Now, I know they take it to a toxic degree and subvert themselves by doubting themselves at every turn. But that initial healthy self-doubt, I wish all of us had it. Do you see? So, loyalty, courage, the courage of Oscar Romero, and the humility that comes from healthy self-doubt. Was there another hand over there? Yes.
I'm not sure I know the exact question. You said something about lack of commitment, or did I misunderstand you?
That was in the 5. The 5 is afraid of commitment. Yeah, not the 6. The 6 will be very committed, sometimes too committed. Yes?
The core need for a 6 would be security.
Security, yeah.
And the core need for a 5 would be knowledge.
That's all right. Very good. Forgive me if I didn't say that. I'm trying to say too much too quick. Yes?
You mentioned Limbaugh being an 8. Is that the only type that falls into substance abuse?
There are several who are most inclined toward addiction. The 9, because they can't get their energy. So they think drugs will do it or alcohol will do it. Many of the guys at the jail in my years here were 9s. The 2, because the 2 is trying to feed himself or herself from outside by other people's inputs, literally their food that they give us or their drink that they give us. It feels like love. I mean, the 2s joke about their love of chocolate very often, which they usually do love chocolate. But food in general becomes a medication for the 2, and that transfers to all ingested materials. That this will fill up my need for love. This food, this drink, these drugs, this alcohol. And the 7 is inclined toward addiction because they overdo everything, which we'll get to in a minute. The 8, I wouldn't say is especially inclined toward it, more than the other types. Yes, Judy?
You were saying you see a lot of 2-5 like marriages. Is there a number that 6s are good with? My request for outer authority here.
No, that's a good question. The most common thing I find is the original triangle of 3, 6, and 9. those types move between one another and beautifully balance one another. So very often 6s do find themselves attracted to 3s or 9s, and that's true of the other 2 also. 3s marry 9s, 9s marry 3s. Yeah. And please don't take that as absolute. You know, that's just, yeah, all right. Yes, Bob.
Would you list China as a country?
You know, some people have said 3 for China, too. I've never been there, so I don't know the exact energy. What were you thinking?
I was thinking 6.
Oh. Well, there's a 3-6-9 movement, but it might be. It might be 6. And moving toward the 3, toward being very, yeah, might be true. All right, any other questions on those 2? Yes?
You mentioned the 4 moving to 5 presenting some sort of an issue.
The 4 being balanced by the 5 wing and the 5 being balanced by the 4 wing. We'll get to the wings, I hope, still this afternoon. I'm going to start with the 1, not because it's the first number, but because it's who I am. And if you'll allow me then to mock Richard and make fun of myself, then you'll hopefully allow me to do it with you and you won't take offense. The need, the underlying need, and I had this in the first book and I don't think I'll change it up, is a compulsive need to feel that I am right. It is so constant. Now remember, you all have it. We just made an art form out of it. We somehow got the message that if we were right, we would be on top of the situation. We would be in control. We would make this uncontrollable world just a little bit controllable. So we are driven toward moralisms, toward righteousness, toward arrogance, toward absoluteness. I am right is what we're always saying. And we work so hard to be right. We tried as little boys, as I did, to please my very demanding mother. And I'm not blaming her for it. I was her favorite, but still, she was a very demanding 8. And I knew the only way I'd keep her love was being a good little right boy and never making any mistakes. Well, it worked. That's why I became her favorite. I'm sure the others caused trouble, but I didn't. I'm not saying in each case that's going to apply, that you got it from your parents, but I'm saying it was a piece of it, I think, for me. Not just I am right, but I am good. It takes such a moral tone. That's why it's crucially important that somewhere in the middle of life's journey, a 1 see that they're not good. We almost have to sin. We just have, and sin boldly. It's no surprise that came from Martin Luther, because Martin Luther was a 1. A classic one, a reformer. We're always trying to reform everything, starting with ourselves. We're picking on ourselves constantly. Our animal symbol is the barking dog, We're just barking at ourselves. Richard, you should work harder. Richard, you should do it better. Now, it has some gift form to it. We almost always are good teachers because we're searching for the right word to communicate the right idea, which we, of course, have. You see? Oh, it's such circular logic. We all operate inside of it. We're perfectionists. But really, and I want to tell you this in all truth, it's only by our own stupid definition of perfection. I mean, it's so egocentric. I'm very sloppy about some things, but I'll have 2 or 3 areas where I want it the way I want it. I don't know where it comes from, but it gives me untold happiness when it's that way. I don't know why. It's just, when my wastebaskets are emptied, I was emptying them at the resource center yesterday. It's a better world, It is so silly. And I know it's silly, And yet it's just, I can go to bed easier that night. I'm only real when I'm making effort. Yeah. When I'm giving it we're hard workers. We are workaholics, really. 1s and 3s are both workaholics. We've got a heroic self-image, a muscular self-image. I'm not muscular physically, but we'll try to find other ways to be muscular. I'm a muscular teacher. So you've got to be some way to be strong and heroic and significant. We don't trust any voices that feel soft and sloppy, and they've got to be self-sacrificial voices. We become little cadets, little seminarians like I did. The self-image is, I am a good boy. I am a good girl. Look at me, how good I am. And that's you see why I said at the beginning of the day, you're destroyed by your gift? Imagine if you really keep trying to maintain that into your 40s, 50s, and 60s. How unreal you're going to become, how rigid you're going to become, how anal retentive you're going to become. The one left to himself or herself is anal retentive. They're the old school marm who's just looking around for things to clean up and correct, things to make better and make right. We're always polishing up the world. John the Baptist was probably a one. And I want to say this at the beginning. You tend, although we've made John the Baptist the patron of our center, the prophet in the desert, but you tend not, I can see right through John the Baptist. You'll see that in my new book, Soul Brothers, where my chapter on John the Baptist is, oh, come on, John, get off it, You will not tend to like your own number in general, because you see it. You see it for what it's worth. You know the game she's playing. You know the game he's playing because you've been playing it all your life. Threes don't like another three on the staff normally because they start competing with one another for the same successes. Do you see? And they know she's being half deceitful right now because that's the way I used to deceive and get away with it. And now she's not getting, I'm going to make sure she doesn't get away with it. Do you see? So we're high-minded. We tend to have bright, animated faces. I hope I do. I don't know if I do. Ordered and tidy spaces. Abe Lincoln was a one. Ralph Nader. Here he is going off again, Save the world. Doesn't matter that it destroyed it last time in some people's judgment, You just see one all over Ralph Nader's face, They're often angular faces, like Abe Lincoln too. But you see a high moral achievement in someone like Abe Lincoln. And on some levels in Ralph Nader, I guess too, at least for the environment. But we can be very linear if we have our righteous explanation. So a lot of ones are attracted to fundamentalism. We're often correcting ourselves inside. I have no doubt what I'll be doing tonight. What will be going through my mind tonight is how I didn't say it right today. I gave you the wrong impression on that. I'll just be ripping it apart. And I don't know how not to do that after the fact. We're just critics. Self-criticism and other criticism. And we're as hard on you as we first are on ourselves. So how do we unmask it? We got to stop doing it to ourselves. Now, I'm getting much better at that as I get older. You should listen to my early tapes. I don't know why anybody bought them, I'm just terribly barking at the world, which is what we're good at, barking dogs. My friend calls me hornets. He says, you just go after things. We're very focused. And anything that keeps us from our focus, we tend to resent. So it's very hard to stop us when we're on a flow. Therefore, what we got to stop doing is being on a flow so we can be interrupted and we can be stopped. It's very hard for ones to multitask like women and mothers do so well. Very hard. Just, if my mind's going this direction, don't pull me over there or you'll see a bit of flash in my eyes. I've learned how to stop really saying something unkind to you, but it's immediate instinct inside of me. Why are you interrupting me? Don't you know I'm going on this flow? You see? So if you know that about a one, it'll help you. We're just terrible, really. We're impatient. We're worn out by the end of the day. By 9, I just start fading. Normally, because remember, the whole day has been full body perceptions of reality, nonstop. And it's too much. I don't know how to react to it. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to change it. I don't know how to make it right. And so once in a while, we'll lash out with a strong overstatement, which I do on tape too. We tend to be into meritocracy. About I deserve, you deserve. If you listen to my tapes, I'm always preaching against that. Why? Because that's the way I am. All of my sermons are to myself, you know. It's so I'm begging like St. Paul was, who was another one, maybe an 8, I'm not sure. But begging for unconditional love, begging for justification by faith. Because that's the one thing on the gut level we cannot believe, that you get anything for nothing, right? I only get it, I only deserve it if I work hard, if I work damn hard. You know? And then we deeply resent people who want a free lunch. God, I sound like a Republican, you know? It's like, what makes you think you deserve that? My gut wants to say, you know, you didn't pay your dues yet. You didn't work yet. You didn't try harder. We try harder, and you should try harder. If the truth is told, we don't respect people who don't try hard. We don't. We have to work at it, right? People who don't give 100%, we don't respect. Because we think we give 100%. In fact, we only give 100% in 1 or 2 areas where we've decided to be heroic. And that's where I got to be honest. And those are the humiliations that you learn as life goes on. Shoulds and oughts control our whole life. Grace, when we fall into grace, it's no surprise grace is the title of 3 of my books, because our entire life is a search for grace. And when we get it, we really get it. I think some of my stuff, I've explained grace very well, because when it overwhelms me, I could just weep. I could just, the world is finally reconfigured into a beautiful world, and I can finally be happy. You see, I'm not happy. The one space I'm not happy in. And yet I maintain it for some reason. Do you understand? This meritocracy, tit for tat, quid pro quo, you only deserve something if you work hard, is not a happy world. You never live up to your own expectations, and no one else is ever allowed to live up to your expectations. We're forever fighting the cosmic war against crud, you know? Ralph Nader, there he is. Yeah. I think it's what led me to involvement with peace and justice people. Because here were the people who seemed to be having my values of trying. We have a great love for justice and peace and truth in the world, because that's right, that's good, that's the way it should be. But just more often than not, when I got close to him, I was not impressed. You know, again, the energy was not right. The traits were correct. See it? It was the Enneagram that taught me this. The traits were correct. They're out there on the picket line. But you go home and do a planning meeting with them, and they're as violent as anybody else. They have to have their way. They have to hear it their way. And I saw all of that in myself. A lot of peace and justice people are ones who want the world the way they want the world. So it gave me at the same time an immense sympathy for them and an immense impatience with them. You see? And by reason of my Franciscan vocation and having a chance for an interior life and Jesus showing himself to me as a young man already, I don't mean visually, but really, I think I experienced the serenity already as a boy. I'm sure it's the reason I became a priest, that there were moments that were so wonderful, so serene, so beautiful, so whole, so everything, with no need to eliminate anything. That's why I wrote the book, Everything Belongs. I'm sure that already as a 4-year-old boy, I experienced that. Just ecstasy. I can still feel myself. I must have been 3 or 4 looking at the Christmas tree in Kansas. And I thought I was going to float through the ceiling. It was just, I don't know why it was the Christmas tree, but it was a beautiful world, and God was in it, and I was in it, and it all made sense. And that's what, you see, it's the positive soul experience that you're trying to recreate. My soul experience is, there is such a thing as a perfect world. I know because I tasted it for 30 seconds when I was 3 years old. You understand? So I can't forget it. I know there could be a world where everybody loves everybody. And I was in the middle of a very loving home, both mom and dad, and even my older sister when she wasn't picking on me. It was a safe, it was a safe world. So I'm going to be emphasizing that the wound doesn't come first. And here I think Matthew Fox was absolutely brilliant in re-emphasizing original blessing as preceding original sin. In the book here, I call it toward the beginning the soul child. And my soul child would be the 7. As a little boy, I was just always happy. Mother said, you were so excited all the time, you would just squeal with delight. You were always squealing with, ah! And she says, and you'd dance and you'd sing. And one time she says, I told you, go out on the back porch and scream if you want to scream. But she says it wasn't an angry scream, it was always a happy scream. You know? Of course, those shock waves of reality were coming toward me, and they were, for the most part, wonderful. It's just a wonderful world. And I'm a part of it. I was a happy little 7 boy. And then the wound came, I don't know when. Was it after the Christmas tree? But somewhere, damn it, it isn't a perfect world. And so what I move into is I'm going to find a way to make it perfect. Right? I'm going to find to make it the way I want it. And that becomes the 1. That's my fallenness. And now I cannot not be a 1. It's my strategy. It's my life script. It's my way of surviving. It's been my way of getting energy and perceiving the world for so long. I cannot change it entirely. All I can do is move it toward redemption, transformation, the true self. And what will happen is ever so often, I'll taste that happy little boy again. And, it's enough to live for. You know, it's enough to know that perfection is possible, and that it's possible enough that I can let go of the imperfection. And I don't need to change everybody like I used to, and fix everybody and fix the church. I know it still sounds like I'm trying to, but I really don't need to the way I needed to as a young man. It just is a different space inside. So that's just a very quick example. Another thing that you tend to let go of, this is true of the 1 and the 2, and I have a lot of 2 wing in me too, is in this quid pro quo thinking of the 1, we tend to be making lists and keeping accounts of how much we've given. The 2 does this in an emotional way, we do it in a heady way, of how much I've given and how much you owe me, right? That's why it's been a grace to be a Franciscan on many levels, but to have to work for a salary or money, because that isn't even an issue. It's never, the money thing is eliminated. But because most of you don't have that luxury to, we're almost trained in keeping lists. Do you understand? I wonder if that wasn't the real meaning of the vow of poverty. That didn't have to worry about earning money or making a list. I think we've abused it a lot too. But the underlying thing of breaking down meritocracy, breaking down worthiness systems, breaking down I deserve, you owe. And I offer that, brothers and sisters, to all of you, because it's not just the 1 and the 2. We all do it. Again, we've just made an art form out of it. The country is the one that I used in the first book, I think I would still use, is Switzerland. If you've ever been to Switzerland, you won't see any trash on the streets. Right? In fact, I don't think there's any trash in the whole country. It doesn't exist. They build these real pretty little boxes that you put all the trash in, and then it's all covered up. You never see it. The concern about time, who is it that makes watches? Swiss, art form. You got to be on time. Überpunktlich, they call it, over punctual. To come in late like a few of you did, I should have pointed you out, is just unacceptable in Switzerland. Unacceptable, all right? If it says 10 o'clock, you're there at 10 o'clock. The Mexicans could not survive. I don't think, could not survive in Switzerland. And banks, I mean, is it any surprise that all these, keeping accounts and keeping them very accurately? You're going to see how countries take these compulsions to an art form. And it's great to begin with Switzerland because they have taken one-ishness to an art form. The story I remember telling on the first tapes 20 years ago, but I'll tell it again. The first time I taught in Zurich, in fact, I think I was teaching the Enneagram, this is years ago, but it was a Sunday morning and we had a break and the streets were deserted and I walked across the middle of the street. We'd call it jaywalking, but it's really no problem on Sunday, Now on the ends of each block in Switzerland, there's very clear markers where you are to walk. You want to talk about anal retentiveness, all right? A man shouted at me from his window, 999. And he and he pointed over, you walk in the appropriate place. This is unbelievable, The church is filled with these people, or at least it was. The old Catholic Church very much appealed to that kind of energy. I mean, these were our novice masters and teachers in religious life. They were all ones who thought there was something meritorious and salvific about walking inside the lines, that this pleased God. And we took culture and made it into salvation, which is horrible, But almost every culture has done it. So the country Switzerland, barking dog, ant, a little ant, work, work, work. You never see an ant sit still, do you? No. They just keep moving. We're ants and we're hornets. We go right toward the task, but we're mostly barking dogs. Okay.
So is the United States agree?
Oh, yes. And Israel. If it'll help you understand why this Jewish American thing can't be broken, because we're the same. All right? Israel is a three-country and America is a three-country. We've both made an art form of it, and they cannot see our dark side in a certain sense. But we certainly can't see theirs because we're the same. Yeah. No, not Germany. Wait for Germany. 4, we're still in the heart space. It's the conflicted heart. They have all these...
Does that mean she's going to pay the bill too?
Not only do they feel all these emotions, but they found a creative way to try to distill them and get in touch with them. And it's through the word, or the symbol, or the metaphor, or the color, or the art form. It works for them. It pulls together their complex, subtle, and emotional life in a way that literally they can get a handle on it. That's why you've seen 4s in art museums. They're just breathy with excitement. It's just, it's beauty for a 4 is like a religious experience. The rest of us think they're sort of off, or eccentric or something. But the world will be saved by beauty. Who said that? Was that Dostoevsky? The 4 believes that in their gut. Huh? Now, the exact flip of that, however, is also true. 4s are maudlin. 4s are dark. Now, that's a form of beauty for them, though. Hold on to that. Huh? 4s are moody. 4s are suicidal in the worst sense. 4s love to talk about death and darkness. Film noir in France. My God, can France make a happy movie? I've never seen it, if there is one. It's always just they are attracted by the dark side. They really are. So much so that even when something good happens to them, they'll turn it into a tragedy. Huh? They love the tragic while saying they don't. All right. They love to have had a tragic childhood, and they'll make it 4 times more tragic than it was, The tragic gives them energy. Let me repeat it. The tragic gives them energy. And so they naturally wrap themselves around it. And it's true. There was a guy in the seminary with me, a classic 4. And in those days, of course, we were really into conformity. We all had to be at everything. And he would disappear for a few days and in his room all holed up. And the, formation directors would knock on his door and he'd say he was sick or something. And then he'd appear after 3 days and he'd written an overture each time or something. or a whole sheaf of poems or whatever. Immense creativity, but basically he was depressed for 3 days. Deep depression, dark depression. Oh, they just love to be depressed. Now the rest of us say, well, God, why would anybody love? And they would swear they don't love to be depressed, but they do. They need it. This is what I mean by beating yourself on the head and calling it happiness. Why do you do this to yourself? Well, it gets me my energy. And whatever way gets you your energy, they know their best creativity comes out of suffering. It's why so many artists live in the poor part of town, live in a little apartment. The rest of us would go crazy. Oh, I'm a suffering artist. No, can't even afford my mortgage payments or whatever it might be. And they probably can't, but they love it, They'll tell that story. They'll milk it for all it's worth the rest of their life. How poor they were, and how much they suffered. They do know how to suffer, but they know how to milk the suffering and make it into art, make it into beauty. They will often destroy relationships. And this is why 4s can be very difficult people to be married to or to be with. I'm told this by marriage partners of 4s. And when one of your children is a 4, they're not easy to raise, I'm told either. Because everything's histrionic, everything is tragedy, everything is prima donna performance. This is the center of the world. Why isn't the whole world appreciating me? So the need, as you can hear it, is the need to be special. Now the amazing thing is they are rather creative, special people. But they're attached to it. They're addicted to it. They're advertising it too much. They're trying too hard. And so a lot of people don't like 4s either. All the heart space people make a lot of enemies for 3 different reasons. The hysteria of the 2 in reaction, the manipulativeness of the 3 while trying to organize you, and the eccentricity and tragedy of the 4. Just you want to stay away from them for a while. I want to make sure I don't humiliate anybody in particular, but they love black. And I do see a few people here in black, but it doesn't mean because you're in black. Black is the tragic color, but it's also the color of dignity. And if at all possible, they will wear a mauve scarf over the black. I taught this once, and a woman stood up and said, "Ta-da!" And she was a 4, and she was totally in black with a mauve scarf. And I hadn't even seen her. But mauve, whatever that exact color is, I'm sure the 4s could tell me, is a very special color. I don't know why they're attracted to it, but it's really sort of eccentric when you go toward the purple. And anyway, people normally don't dress in purple and red, and they do, In some ways, 4s are easy to spot, because they refuse to be one of the hoi polloi. They refuse to be one of the crowd. Very often when you're sitting at a table, I don't again want to point anybody out, they will try to sit not at a table. They will try to sit apart and separate. They will literally pull their chair back so I'm not a part of the group. They almost feel they lose their energy if they're like everybody else. And be sympathetic to them and understanding it. I can't it's like death to just sit here and be dressed in just a white t-shirt, and be sitting like everybody else. They have to make their statement in the way they sit, in what they're wearing, and it's second nature to them. They cannot not do it. So you might as well learn to love them for it, because a lot of the times they're real good at it. I mean, that is rather clever the way you're sitting, or whatever it might be. They'll naturally see the different way to do everything, which is why their art never ceases. They will not fall into any kind of conformity. They refuse to be conformists. It reached an eccentric explosion in the hippie movement when I was growing up. It just took over America, the 4 energy. Maybe you'd say at a superficial level, but it was countercultural. They're often countercultural in one sense or another. They often, since we're debating so much about the homosexual issue these days, normally the 4 has no trouble understanding homosexuality. They're naturally androgynous, even if they're totally heterosexual themselves. Yeah, I can understand why someone would enjoy men and enjoy women. Because the 4-person is androgynous. They just seem to get it. It's their natural space they move in, which might not be acted out in a genital way. But in their mind and in their heart, it's not inconceivable to them. And you need to know that because that's the nature of their soul. They're male, female. They really are. I'm not saying they're gay, but, although they can be gay, but many people confuse gay people with 4s, and they're not the same. But it's that same integration of male and female that the gay person has, which is also held by the 4-person. So they're 2 different things, but they overlap. And sometimes you will call 4s gay, and they're not at all. Do you understand? They're maybe artistic, creative, androgynous, and so forth. Okay, they like a kind of smooth rigidity. They don't want to admit that there is a rigidity in themselves. And the rigidity is this. They're perfectionists just like we 1s are, believe it or not. That's why we 1s and 4s can tend to understand one another. Because we're both perfectionists, we take ours in a moralistic direction. The 4 takes it in an aesthetic direction. But once it feels right to them, you better not change it, right? You better not tamper with it, you know? If he picked out green and you just quickly just missed the green, you know, be ready for a serious conversation, right? He or she was attached to that green for some reason. That's what I mean by they're this strange combination of can be very rigid people aesthetically. The feeling of a room is important. And you better not go in and move that sofa, all right? Another hour conversation. If you move that sofa without asking me or respecting me enough, they understand feng shui naturally, all right? The energy in a room and how that looks right and that looks right over there. And they're usually right. But do you hear that word right? That becomes their rigidity. And they can be rather demanding about it, even though they'll say it in a much smoother way than we 1s will. They're natural snobs, just like the 4s and 5s are both snobs. They work for a studied casualness. They've worked all morning to try to look like they just threw this on. All right? Oh, I just threw these rags on. They were the first thing in the closet. No, they weren't. All right. You thought about it for an hour probably before. Does this go with this? And so forth. But what they put together will usually look pretty good. They do have elite standards. The ordinary is what they avoid. That's it in a word. The ordinary is boring to them. They can't find any energy there. Why would someone want to be like everybody else? So their conversion comes precisely when they can eat the ordinary, right? When they can sit in the circle like everybody else, and wear a white t-shirt that isn't especially shocking or showy, and not say something that'll make everybody notice them. When 4s can start doing that, you know they've broken through. They'll still be creative people, but they're not forcing it on you. Do you see? And they're not forcing you to notice them all the time by their prima donna status. So you see this in its art form in Japan. Japan is really an extraordinary culture. They work so hard at studied casualness. Their yards, their houses, all of it is worked at. I remember walking on the edge of Tokyo somewhere where they had rock gardens, rock stores. It didn't mean what we mean here, where they actually sell rocks in all kinds of shapes. And you'd see the Japanese on Sunday afternoon walking around the rocks, and finding the meaning to the perfect rock. And then that would be hauled to sit in exactly the right place in their front yard, And it's minimalism, there's as little as possible so that one rock sticks out. And then bonsai, arranging the tree, it takes great work and many years to get the tree to look natural. But it's totally artificial. You understand? That's the 4. You see? Working at looking natural by being artificial. But they do it. And they hate artificiality. They hate it in themselves. They despise it in themselves. You could say a 4's whole life is a search for authenticity. The very word thrills them. I want to be authentic. I want to be authentic. And they do. It's their 3 wing moving into the 4. And so that desperate search for authenticity can make them go very deep, looking for the right word, the right symbol, the right emotion. Thomas Merton. I mean, Thomas Merton is the quintessential redeemed 4 for the last. I mean, and the monks told me that. He was definitely a 4. He had to live in his hermitage by himself. And, but I mean, here it is 30 years since he's been dead. And you pick up a Thomas Merton book and it's so right on. It's like he wrote it yesterday. How can a man's perception be that accurate? William Shakespeare, a redeemed 4. And in fact, I'm going to read for you, knowing the 4s will only fully listen to me if I quote some poetry. Sonnet 29 of Shakespeare. Right? Sonnet 29 of Shakespeare is almost a quintessential study of a 4. And he was a 4. Which is why Shakespeare can describe any human relationship and feeling just almost to perfection. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, it's called sometimes fortune and men's eyes. So when people aren't liking me, I all alone beweep my outcast state. They love to be outcasts. If you don't cast them out, they'll cast themselves out. You know? So this whole thing is a study in envy. It's a study in self-pity. It's a study in chosen sadness. It's a study in the classic psychological type of the 4, which is manic depression. And he loves it, right? All of it. I beweep my outcast state and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. And I look upon myself and I curse my fate, wished me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him, see the envy, if only I were like him, with friends possessed. Of course, he's lost all of his friends. I'm desiring this man's art and that man's scope. With what I most enjoy, I'm contented least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despairing and despising, haply I think on thee. Now he'll move all this suffering to this beautiful love statement. So he's nothing but disgrace in fortune and men's eyes. The whole world hates me. But thank God, there's one person who appreciates my gift, right? Haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, here's the depressive going toward the manic, sings hymns at heaven's gate, for thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. I would not exchange my life for a king, because I've been able to suffer today and I've been able to have ecstasy today. That's all a 4 needs. You've got to know. All right? Just give them some suffering and give them a little moment of breakthrough, their ecstasy has to have a bit of the breaking some rules, going outside the line, an illegitimate love affair, something that others will dismiss or look down upon. That actually makes it more exciting, which is probably why they can understand homosexuality. That is not demeaning, it's actually more attractive because it's breaking the rules. You don't understand the 4 until you understand that energy. The countries have already mentioned: France in the west, Japan in the east. It's written all through their culture in every way. If you haven't eaten in France, you haven't eaten. I mean, it's just, how can people produce such delicious food? Just at corner restaurants. You can't be a short order cook in France without, I was told, 1 to 3 years of training in making sauces and souffles. I mean, that's why McDonald's just doesn't go over there. You know? Food has got to be haute cuisine, haute couture, everything haute, classy, better than usual, because to be ordinary would to be like the English. I mean, that's what they'd say. Who wants to be like the English? I'm speaking as if I'm a French person. I love the English, but that's what they would clearly feel. French people only tend to vacation in former French colonies. Did you know that? The rest of us are so plebeian, you know. Why would anybody want to, you know, come to the United States where everything's so ordinary? Huh? Go to some place that knows how to do things with class. So that's their snobbishness, even though the rest of the world admires it, because their snobbishness is half true. Questions on the 3 or the 4? Oh, I'm sorry. The animal is the basset hound, you know, that walks around looking so sad all the time. Their sadness makes them special. You've got to know that. And the mourning dove, mourning, the cooing and lamenting about how tragic their life is and how sad their day has been thus far. Yes, Dennis?
Is the ability to understand anybody's feelings related to the androgyny, and does that relate to the shamans in most primitive cultures that are androgynous?
Well, you could go down that road. I think you could make a lot of that point. Whenever you put the male and the female together in a person, you'll see this in the healthy gay person too. This ability to read meanings and events that appears to be better than most other people. So I think that is true of the 4, the healthy 4. Now remember, again, the unhealthy 4 is an eccentric, neurotic narcissist. In fact, the 4 is inclined toward narcissism. Very self-centered, because everything has to meet my criteria of specialness or tragedy. But if you take that rich inner life, which they do have, a rich fantasy world, which they do have, you take that and connect it outward to the 3-wing, which is what Merton did, getting all of his books written and everything, then you've got a productive 4 who's not just special, but doing something with his specialness. The most trapped one is all from the 4 with the 5-wing, because he or she does not know how to get out of himself. And so they become very often very narcissistic people who just sit at home and paint and stick the paintings in the back room. Do you understand? It's for no social purpose or no advantage to the rest of civilization. It's just for my private feeling special. That's not so good. Anybody else? Yes, John Carr. Of course, I have my own bias there, but I do believe that a certain degree of solitude, you see it in all the great world religions at the higher levels, that you not only become more capable of solitude, but you have a greater need for it. Now, the 5 can hide there, as we're going to see in a minute. But I would say a certain degree of chosen, healthy solitude, not antisocial solitude, because you hate people. That's not God-led solitude. But where you really know that you have to live out of a larger truth than everybody else's voices and the need to talk. I think to a certain degree that's necessary for all of us, especially in the second half of life. You normally can't handle it much in the first half of life. Yes?
It sounds like the character Fraser on TV was suffering from a forced gratification.
Well, I never watched that a lot, but I'll take your word for it, yeah. Really? Fraser. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Observations? If you want to offer names like that, that's an excellent idea, because, again, if you get a picture, it'll help you understand it. Yes, Carlos?
Where does David fall?
David in the scriptures? I would think he's a 3. At least the way he's presented in the scriptures. You don't become the whole man. You know, the king. The king archetype is the one who can hold all the parts together. And remember, 3s are masters. They're like, 3-ring circus, and they hold it together. And that's sort of the way that David is presented. You know, he's a warrior, he's a magician, he's a lover, and he's a king. And anybody who can hold that much together is either a 1 or a 3, normally. The 1 does it in their head, the 3 does it organizationally. Yes?
Is there a particular type that really struggles with not being able to do the following?
The 7 and the 3. 7 and 3 find it hardest to be alone, and if the truth would be told, the 2 does too. And the 2, well, they all 3 need it immensely. The 2 needs it to break their codependency patterns, you see? And the 3 needs it to find out who they really are. And the 7 needs it to stop being an airhead. And well, we'll get to... Shouldn't make fun of them ahead of time, yes?
And I'm wondering, do they deceive themselves about having any needs? I mean,
Yes, they would. And in that, they'd be similar to the 2. That's why they can be such workaholics. Deny their own needs. When in fact, remember, all 3 of the heart people are very needy emotionally. 2, 3, and 4 are the neediest of all types for emotional response.
and do they deny failures or weaknesses?
Yes, that's what'll be the tragic flaw of a 3. The denying of their own failure, the denying of their own weaknesses. That's why it's crucial that a 3 has one truth speaker in his or her life. He says, tell me the truth. Tell me, I got to hear it, because I'll fool myself. Yes?
Just Van Gogh with the classic 4.
That's right, that's right.
That he couldn't survive in this world.
That's right, Bob. Yeah, Van Gogh would almost be an idyllic poster child for. Cutting off his ear, you know. Ooh, it's tragic, huh? Any other suggestions like that? Yeah, of course, Poe, The Dark Side. There you go. Who? You know, it's funny. I would have said that, and some of the other teachers told me they think he's an 8. And it's his passion in his art that comes through and still attracts us so much. So I don't know for sure, but I could see why you'd say 4. But others say, no, he's an 8. And it's his passion with his artistic skill, that combination you just can't resist looking at a Michelangelo sculpture. But if you look at it, what it does for you is it gives you passion too. So the very fact that his Sistine Chapel and his sculptures can make you so passionate will probably tell you that's his energy. It's a good way to work back to finding the energy.
Beethoven and musicians are lovely for us.
I would think a lot of musicians would have to be for it, to have any sensitivity. Now Mozart's a 7, and you can feel it in his music. It's too much. It's all over the place, you know. But Beethoven and Bach, you know, that has to be 4 sensitivity. Be my guess. Yes, John Carl. Oh, Goethe, of course. Yeah. I was going to quote Faust a little more, but he would be the German for Goethe, which is hard for us to pronounce. Leonardo da Vinci. I would think 4. I would think. Yeah. I'm off the top of my head, you know. But this is the only way we can get it, is to say names like this. I'm sorry I didn't let you do it more earlier. All right, I think we're time for a 5-minute break. We'll come back and do 5 and 6. From the heart space to the head space. Even though I hope you're seeing as I go on, I hope we have time to go into it, these are melding into one another. There is an overlapping. And in fact, if you look at the classic diagram of the Enneagram, the biggest space in the diagram is right now between the 4 and the 5. If you have one in front of you, there you see it right there. It's the biggest space. Now that was intentional in the geometric diagram. The reason being, if you can bridge that gap between head and heart, that person is especially creative, holistic. And again, I'd speak to Thomas Merton. Thomas Merton's books will speak to your heart and your head simultaneously. But it's one of the hardest bridges to gap, to be fully in your heart and fully in your head and have them not cancel one another out. Good intellectual work and good emotional work, and have the emotions feed the head and the head feed the emotions. But let's pretend we've jumped over that gap. We're now into the 5 space. The 5 is the pure, obvious compulsion. Remember that? The preceding number to the stress point. So in a certain sense, the 5 looks the most heady of all of the 3 head types. Externally, they tend to be absent-minded professors, right? They live their whole life behind poker eyes with compulsive observation of the data. They're always taking in the data. They can't get enough data, and the data is never all in, right? There's always more that can be known, another book that can be read. Even in terms of our psychosomatic unity, I don't know hardly any 5s beyond the age of 20 who don't have glasses, because their energy is all in the eyes. They're watchers by definition. They watch, and their eyes are like vacuum cleaners, right? They just take in, suck it in. Any kind of ideology, explanation, theory, description. They love the encyclopedia, you know. Now, I don't mean that they're all intellectuals. Some will just do it on a lifestyle level. They tend to love to sit in the back of the room. You 5s are all back there, probably you're in the corners, you know. They never want to sit in the front. There's too much energy up here. They're always trying to control the energy and control themselves. They're very controlled people. And where there's the least energy is in the corner or the back of the room, where they won't likely to be called upon. They won't be observed, but they can observe. That's what they like. They don't want you to know anything about their private life. They're very stingy. The Sufis called them the stingy ones. They're emotionally stingy. They're stingy with any stories about themselves. Even though they always want to find out everything about you. They just want to gather information. They want to know. It's the compulsion to know. On the level of soul, it's as if there's too much heat in the kitchen. I'm leaving, and the way I'm leaving, I'm going into my head. And that's where they live from. In religious life, I remember where we live in big communities. I did my first 15, 16 years, and the 5s would always try to get the room on the 3rd floor in the corner, you know, farthest away from anybody else. They like to live alone. They're natural hermits. They're natural celibates, probably for the wrong reason, because frankly, sexual encounter is too emotional. Sexual engagement is too engaging. They don't have a strong need compared to the rest of us for sexual encounter. I'd rather maintain myself and maintain my boundaries. They're always maintaining their boundaries, and they overdo it. The animal is the owl, therefore. The barn owl at that. Picture an owl. You've been in the barn already for an hour. Then you hear a little tiny sound, and you look up. And there he is with those great big eyes, just watching you. They love to watch. And from that, then, they love to come up with universal theories. They're philosophers, Thomas Aquinas, Bonaventure, Hegel, Heidegger, all of them. How else would you come up with a great big universal explanation, Aristotle, unless you were a 5? You sit back and you observe for 20 years, and then you come up with your theory, you see? And this settles all the dust. So now I don't have to emotionally engage with people. I don't have to emotionally engage with life or with naked bodies or anything like that. I'll just think my way through life. I'll just plan my way through life. I'll just organize my way in a mental sense through life. They sever the connections as much as they can with everything and everybody. And that's why they can become real loners and even dangerous people if they don't have some healthy community and some healthy relationship in their life, because there's no reference point for them. There's no outer criteria that can critique them. They can be quiet, but here's the flip side of them. Sometimes when they start telling you their theories, you can't shut them up. So they flip from total silence to, okay, we got it. You can be quiet now, you know. And they go on and on and on and on and on, because they've been living inside of this head. They've constructed this huge universal field theory, you know, and now you got to be subjected to the whole thing. And because they have cut themselves off from human relationship, most of you, especially you 2s, 3s, and 4s, you know how to read people's eyes when they're bored with you. And they're saying, okay, we got it, stop. The 5 doesn't read your eyes. They just keep talking. No, we got it. We've heard it. We don't need to hear any more. You finally got to get the hook and pull them off the stage. These are classic college professors, of course, who are given this permission to stand behind a pulpit like I'm doing and just talk to you ad nauseum, you know. And then our professors, they'd go back to their cloister. We wouldn't see them till the next Latin class. And they'd stand there and bore us for an hour and a half. 5s, forgive me, can be very boring. Because they've had no reality check for the meaningfulness of their ideas or the helpfulness of their ideas, right? It's all inside of their own little control tower bouncing back and forth. And that's why we call him the absent-minded professor, or the old curmudgeon who's cut off. He doesn't know he's right, he's brilliant in some ways, but he's stupid in other ways, unless he connects with this 4-wing and gets his heart and his sensitivity in shape. Then you can have the brilliant professor who doesn't just have the information, but I can tell when it's getting through to you. I can tell when it's meaningful. I can tell if it's making connections for your life and so forth. But I would say the 5 is the typical boring professor, right? Who has nothing to say, but sometimes does have something to say. And but you have to wait around for the second semester before you'll hear it, you know? Because the whole first semester is just building up to the second semester. Right? And he keeps talking around it and around it with theory and theology. And finally, he himself understands his own point. But that takes him a while. Yes?
Well, I'm just going to say, he's not talking for the audience benefit. He's just talking like he's having a conversation.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. Yes. It's an internal monologue, and you're subjected to it. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, he does find great energy in his inner ideas, do you understand, or she. And so I don't want to say the person is narcissistic or selfish, but they just haven't learned this world of vis-a-vis. They don't know how to act back and forth and to throw the ball back and forth. So it often feels like a monologue and not a dialogue. That's right. So they're stingy not for money as such. They're stingy for information. They keep it. They love books. I had a woman who was a 5 tell me that to be in a library was like a sexual orgasm. Sounds disappointing to most of us, but she said to have books all around me is just a rush of excitement, you know? And you've got to know that's partially true for 5. They love their books. They love their ideas. They don't tend to spend a lot of money on themselves. They really don't, except on books, but nothing else. They can live very simply. Their most common phrase back to you after you've talked, if you were able to get a word in, is interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Now, you know, interesting is a non-committal statement, right? You know, it doesn't help you in the least, right? And also, what was it? Good interesting or bad interesting? Well, I'll have to think about it a little more, he'll say, you know. And this is one of the great difficulties of the 5, is making commitments. They're so withheld that commitment is a certain degree of emotional engagement with the other. but they don't often even want to emotionally engage with your ideas or with your relationship. But on the positive side, if you want a good, objective counselor, get a 5. If you want power behind the throne, it's a volatile, emotional mix inside the job right now. You want someone who can calmly say, well, there's this way of looking at it, there's that way of looking at it, and I wouldn't take that too seriously, and don't worry about that too much. Dang it, they're usually right. See, so some have said detachment is their sin, and detachment is their gift. It's the only number you can use the same word for both their sin and their gift. Detachment, detachment. And detachment is a virtue when you need objectivity, when you need calm evaluation. So that's probably why they make more objective philosophers or accountants or engineers. Thank God, or librarians. Thank God for 5s who will be comfortable sitting in the back office. They love computers, of course. They're just addicted to computers now. They can live their whole life. Instead of a wife, I have a computer. So, instead of a husband, I have a computer. And I can just relate to this nonstop. But I have to say, over the years, many of my best advisors have been 5s. And especially in difficult, demanding situations when everybody is taking sides. And everybody is throwing around blame and making it totally good or totally bad. The 5 can very often see it objectively. Precisely, I think, because of their withheldness. The 5, I'm told, feels empty. And the information is an endless attempt to fill up that inner emptiness. They feel like there's a great big hole. I've had them even describe it for me. And it'll never be filled. That's their primordial soul experience, is I'm empty. I'm empty. There's nothing there. Now, they don't have a lot of need for personal feedback, although they do. We all need other people to love us and to like us. But they are the quintessential headspace. And so they've whittled that down to the minimum. They can do without people the most. You know, speaking of marriages, I've probably met more 2-5 marriages than I would have ever expected. And it's a classic example of marrying your exact opposite. Because the 2 is the compulsive giver, giving for the wrong reasons, but still giving. And the 5 is the compulsive taker. Who's always, and so you can see when they're both 19, they don't have much self-knowledge yet, there's a natural attraction. Let's make him the 5. He appears so masculine and grounded and calm and collected. And she's so bubbly and emotional and lovey-dovey and kissy-feely. You know, well, she's just totally attracted to this male opposite that she is not. And that's the usual pattern I find, the woman being the 2 and the man being a 5. And it works for about 3 years. And, of course, all marriages then face the shadow at a certain point. And the 5 starts wondering, when are you going to let me just stay at home? I don't want to go to all these parties, Or I don't want to be a volunteer at the church. I just want to watch television. And of course, she starts resenting him because he is staying home all the time. And she wants a lot of social relationships. I don't know why God let us make these kind of mistakes, but we are attracted to our opposite. And we'll see that in other cases too. Now, the country I gave, I don't know that it's the best. But I use Scotland. Maybe it's stereotypical. But our image of the stingy Scotsman and the aloof, really Anglo-Saxon gentleman, it's really probably a bit of both of those. Maybe I would just say, the UK, the English and the Scots. That stiff upper lip stuff that we make fun of in the English, this withheldness, this intellectual snobbery, this superiority complex, that's all 5 stuff. And it pretty much is our stereotype of the English. Right? It isn't always true, as we well found out last year, but it is the public image of reserve, always staying back from. There's not the moving toward. Now we're going to see that in all three of these types. And I should have made that point earlier. The 5, 6, and 7, their first response to reality is back away from it. It's not to engage with it. It's not to hug it. It's not to embrace it. It's to pull back, find my own ground, find my own understanding, and perhaps re-enter. But far too often, I'm afraid, they stay in the withdrawn position. And that's particularly true of the 5. They're classic avoiders. Buddhism would very much come out of the 5 space. It makes an art form out of detachment. Makes an art form out of observation, you see? And beautiful, it's right on. Whereas Christian religion, you take the image of the crucified Jesus, it comes much more out of 2 space. A naked, bleeding man on a cross, that's the compassionate lover, do you see? And the Sufis did call Jesus a 2. We, of course, as Christians would say, well, he's all numbers. But what they saw was the great, perfect lover who loved sacrificially for the right reasons. So, take some consolation if you're 2s. Maybe Jesus was a 2. When they find the freedom to give it out before they've taken it in, instead of collecting energy, to once in a while take a risk and give energy before I take it from you, then you know they're growing up. When they can get involved in various forms of volunteerism. I knew a wonderful woman in Cincinnati who was a 5, and wouldn't you know, she became a massage therapist. Now that, you want to talk about acting against, to touch other bodies and to serve other bodies for an hour and a half, She totally moved against her compulsion and is a very healthy spiritual director today. Because she learned how to balance herself out. But that was a heavy price for her to pay. That would not be her natural mode, to be massaging other people's bodies. It took a major giving, a major risk-taking, a major moving against the withholding and the collecting instinct. There are unhealthy 5s that you're around and you actually feel like you're being sucked on. I don't mean sexually. I mean like they're taking your energy, Like I'm worn out. And I just been in the room for 15 minutes with this person. Because they're always wanting whatever. Maybe I feel it because I'm supposed to be a knowledgeable person, supposed to be. And so they'll always want more of my knowledge or more of my facts. And they'll just come with 1 question, 2 questions, 3 questions, 4 questions. Both the 5 and the 6 are questioners. They've always got to get you by their questions. That's just one shape. But I think if you try the English and the Scots, you've got a partial feel for it. The burrowing fox is another animal that spends much, if not most of his day inside of the burrow and just comes and looks out and sees if there's any risk demanded or any threat. If there's no emotional risk, no emotional threat, maybe I'll come out. Some say that the 5 lives their entire life behind a one-way mirror in which they can look out, but they won't let you look back at them. If you say the word share, they'll try to head for the quickest door, They hate to share, especially if it has to do with feelings. When we started the Kiss of Peace in the Catholic Church, they say all the 5s left. Oh, you mean I really got to touch somebody else? Touching is not their thing. They're not real tactile people. But again, they're the objective people that somehow ground the flights of fancy and the flights of emotion that a lot of the rest of us get lost in. And with that, the 6. So if you're unwilling to bear, to carry that ego humiliation that comes in the middle of life, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, you will not move toward total reality. Now, when I say total reality today equals God, same thing. That's We who are believers simply use the word God, but people who don't believe, they'll use the word total reality, perhaps, or force, or something else. The irony is, brothers and sisters, that we actually frustrate in ourselves and for ourselves what we want the most. I don't know why we do this. This is what's damnable about human nature. We really are our own worst enemy. We're a living contradiction, it seems, acting at cross purposes to our own best intents and purposes. We need to know how we are our own worst enemy. And that's what I'm going to try to help you see today, so that you can flow with your gift and also integrate your sin, your shadow, your failure, that which you're afraid of, the stone which you have rejected. The contradictions that we are must be overcome by both affirming them and countering them almost simultaneously. Affirming that broken side as the place of the wound. And that's why we are the religion of the wound, that says it's through the wound that we are healed, through the wound that we come to God. This is the art form of the Enneagram. It simply teaches you how to do that. In that sense, I'm just amazed that some people can think this is New Age or pagan. It's anything but. It's Christian to the core in my understanding of it. But it's at a level of Christianity that I think, frankly, an awful lot of Christians have not wanted to go. We've all created a survival strategy. We've all created a strategic self, a marketable self, a personal manager that we have to fire. And this personal manager is in rather total control of you. And he has told you how to manage yourself for so many years, you don't want to fire him. Because he's sort of working. What we hope for is that he fails. Teresa of Avila had so many wonderful lines, but she said, the sinner is actually one who does not love himself or herself enough. He or she does not see or admire this whole self that we are. And so we split. We try to love the good self and reject the bad self, and we get into this dualism that characterizes most Western people. Instead of this suffering of reality, this bearing of the burden of the two sides of the mystery that we are. Allowing, as Jesus puts it in Matthew 13, the field of weeds and wheat to grow together until the harvest. That's a one-liner from Jesus himself. So don't report me to the bishop, all right? Let the weeds and wheat grow together until the harvest. And don't go and try to pull out the weeds. Because if you do, Jesus says, you'll destroy the wheat along with it. My God, that's brilliant. Why didn't we hear that? Because the calculating mind is always a dualistic mind. It only can read reality in terms of either or. Good guys, bad guys, absolute evil and absolute good. That's why Peter Jackson did what he did with Tolkien's book. That's the best he can do. Is spectacular battle scenes. And that reflects the readiness of our mind, I think. We must notice, brothers and sisters, how we each block ourselves by a preferred style of perception. A preferred style of perception. And that style of perception has become your way of getting your energy. And it works for you. But what I want to point out, if I can today, is, to use a physical image, it's white gas. You know, your car can go on it, but it's finally going to destroy the car. And it ain't going to drive real well on cheap gas. And what we're going to try to do today is take that white gas out and at least show you how to get access with ethyl supreme that doesn't knock or whatever. You know, the real good stuff. It seems that what we do, we actually subvert, and this has to be our original sin. We actually subvert our pleasure and our enjoyment. I'm going to say this, and this will sound too naive to some of you, but it'll make sense, I hope, by the end of the day. If you're not enjoying life at a foundational level, you're not doing it right. You're involved in this approach avoidance, going with the energy and attacking it and hating yourself for it, always at the same time. Most people I know live with one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. Do you see? The guilt and the shame and the fear, they've all been, I shouldn't be this way, but I am, but I don't know how to get rid of it. I'll just keep confessing it or hating myself for it, which profits you nothing. When you're living life right, you will enjoy life. I'm not saying there won't be sufferings and difficulty and hardships, but even underneath those, there's a foundational happiness, a foundational contentment that I am who I am, and it's okay. And God is using all of me, to bring me to God. And I don't spend any time now splitting or projecting or avoiding or denying, because it is what it is, and I am what I am, good and bad put together into one self. And God's mercy is so great, and God's love is so total, that God uses even your sin in your favor. Right? That's it. God will use even your so-called dark side to bring you to God. Tell me what the gospel would be if it's not that. Tell me. What would be good news? All the rest of it is not good news. Most that has been handed to me as good news is bad news, because it's still based on somehow getting rid of something that, damn it, I can't get rid of, right? And so you just live with this terrible, constant self-hatred, which has almost come to be the characteristic of the West. There's this constant, deep self-hatred and self-rejection. The sinner is actually one who does not love himself or herself enough. And so I hope on the other side we can increase this love of yourself. Up against, if we don't teach this kind of discrimination, I think the world will continue to sell itself out to evil. Paul says in Colossians, he stripped the principalities and powers of their phony authority and marched them naked through the streets in his triumph. So stripping them, right, and marching them through the streets is what we're about. It's not killing them, right? You strip them, you expose them for what they are. That's what Martin Luther King was doing. That's what Gandhi was doing. Make evil show itself. Make the policemen of Birmingham, impose their water cannons on us and make them show that they are people of power, not of peace. This is the ultimate overcoming of evil, to make evil show itself for what it is. Now that's why the Enneagram has been called in many ways a negative system. I'll try to make it entertaining today, but in some ways it isn't entertaining. I'm going to make fun of every one of you in this room. And in fact, if you don't suffer that humiliation, if you don't squirm a little bit and say, oh God, he got me, that's me, and that's what I don't want anybody to know, that's what I've always been ashamed of, and that's what I'm trying to cover up. If you don't feel that by the time you leave here at 6 o'clock, then you didn't get it. Right? You didn't get it. If you leave here feeling good about yourself, you didn't get it. Right? You have to feel bad about yourself first. As many have said, yes, the truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. So today, we're into making you miserable. That's my work. So the gift of recognizing spirits, or distinguishing between spirits, translate it the way you want, is one of the named and original charisms of the Holy Spirit. Without it, and I do believe few people have been trained in it, we constantly confuse good with evil. We call good evil, as Isaiah says, and we call evil good. This has to do, and this is what I'm going to be trying to train you in today, with learning to recognize energies much more than superficial external traits. Now, the only way I'm going to be able to teach this is by giving examples of external traits. And a lot of you are going to stop right there. And that's when it becomes a parlor game, you know. She's an artist, therefore she's a 4. That's too simple. Far too simple, you know. Some 4s are not artistic at all. It must be very hard to be a 4 if you're not artistic. But I actually know some, you know, who aren't naturally creative, but they think in that way inside. They just haven't learned how to translate it into the outer world, you see. So don't look for traits. You want to look for motivations. What's their real form of perception? You're going to find that you all take your reality in through a chosen set of blinders. And we're going to try to explain why there's 9. I know some of you say, why not 8? Why not 6? Why not 7? Why not 15? And there will be those of you walking out the door at 6 o'clock and saying, oh, I'm a perfect 10. No, there's 9. I don't know why there's 9. Well, I do partially know, but I'll say it later. But we're going to teach through the traits, but don't get lost in the external traits. They're just partial giveaways. And when you get good at it, you read energies. I mean, really. And this is the reason that Helen Palmer got into it. She told me herself. I mean, she was a psychic intuitive. And she's convinced that you can train people to be psychic. Well, that's what this was about initially. We didn't use that kind of word in the early centuries, but it was training people to read the soul. How to read the soul. And how to pick up, after a while, you can pick it up by their body movements, by their gestures, by their face, I mean, my God. And the more compulsive a person is, the more easy they are to read. You can probably see already that I'm a 1. I'm chopping the air with my gestures, you know. That's the way we do it. We're always chopping reality up somehow, you know, because that gives us some ability to control it. And here I've known this dang thing for 30 years, and I'm still a 1. So I hope that gives you a bit of compassion with yourself and consolation.